Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go Faculty Spotlight, a podcast featuring faculty in the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon, Dean of the College of the Arts and Letters here, and I'm also the host of the podcast. Today I'm talking with Dr. Tamara Smithers, Professor of Art History, and welcome to the show, Dr. Smithers. So great to have you on the podcast today. And we were just kind of talking that you've been here for now 10 years.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what drew you to Austin Peay and the Department of Art and Design.
Yeah, I remember I was finishing my dissertation and I had just defended my dissertation and then came to the interview here. And one of the things that really stood out about Austin Peay was how the faculty kept telling all these stories about their students. It was all about their students. They brought me to the classrooms. I met students as well. They told stories about their students. And so I could really tell that, the faculty cared about not only what they were doing, but about who they were teaching to. It's a 3-day process of an interview, right? And so you kind of get to know the faculty as well. And I realized I would have great colleagues. And so, yeah, it made the decision pretty easy to come here.
So, as you mentioned, I really, in my short period of time here, I've noticed that there really is an investment from the faculty in the students' success, that they are committed to making sure that they have a rich experience while they're here. One of the classes that you teach is a Gen Ed class. Mm-hmm. I think it's Art 1035.
Yep, Introduction to Art.
Introduction to Art. So what's it like teaching kids that are now just experiencing maybe for the first time an art class?
Yeah, it is the hardest class I teach. It has the most students in it, and it's the class that I also teach the most. So it has its challenges because you have students from all across, the campus who are taking it as part of their requirements. And so it's my job to get them to appreciate art. We used to call it art appreciation, but it is an introduction, and it introduces them to art around the world. It introduces them to art making. They actually make some art in addition to learning about art history. We go out and we use our permanent collection that's in the hallways in the Art and Design building on the first and second floor. And maybe, I know a lot of professors do this, put them in small groups and they're looking at actual art. We have a very robust exhibition program. So we take them to the exhibitions. So you're talking about that experiential thing happening, not just in the classroom, but bringing them in front of art. And I think the most rewarding thing for me, I had a student before fall break and she came up with her phone and she was like, I just wanted to show you the sculpture that I saw in Washington, D.C. She went to the National Gallery and she was like, I was able to talk about blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I was really excited to tell who I was with that I, knew something. And so I found that exciting. And so it's a challenge, but getting those students engaged and interested, and when you get that feedback back from them, that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, because in 10, 20, 30 years, they will come to a museum or to a gallery or have some opportunity, and they'll think back and say, I remembered when Dr. Smithers introduced this to me, and I'm so glad that I had that. And so that's the rewarding part of teaching.
Yeah.
And some of the other classes that you get to teach are in your subject area. Let's talk a little bit about some of those classes that you enjoy teaching.
Sure. I've developed a few classes. I teach an Italian Renaissance art history class.
Nice.
I teach European Baroque. And so those are ones I developed to kind of fit within our art history classes. And so I'm an Italian Renaissance specialist, or early modern Italy, we kind of call it now. And so I love teaching that. I get students very interested, engaged. I also teach a study abroad program in Rome. I've developed that. So I catch them early and we talk about Rome, and then I get them interested, and then I take them there. And so a story about Rome is actually, so I didn't get to go during the pandemic. So we're doing it again next summer. And it's a student that was actually in my introduction to art class. So he was a business major. He had me for introduction to art, decided to come back and get a second major in studio art.
Oh, great.
Then he went to Rome with me in 2019. He was a non-traditional student veteran, and he's been working in DC. He's actually sponsoring 2 students to go, and we're creating a scholarship this year to go on the program. So it's kind of that, sometimes you get the immediate reward, right? And
Right.
you know you influence somebody and they come up and show you something or talk to you. This is several years later. So I have had students that are non-art majors go on that trip. It's a studio art class and an art history class for that one. So those are classes I've developed in what I consider my area. And then I also teach a Native American art history class, but I've renamed it visual culture because we study things from graphic design posters for grassroots movements to body art like tattooing and braids and significance of like hair adornment and things like that too.
And you received, I think, a grant to help you with that too.
I did. I applied for a SASSY grant. We're actually going to the Tennessee State Powwow tomorrow. It's at Hunter State Park. It's an annual event that didn't happen during COVID, so I haven't been in a while. And we got a SASSY grant to pay for students to go and to get some fry bread, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, sure.
Okay. They haven't had it, so I'm really excited to introduce them to this staple.
Yeah, and a very important part of representing Indian culture and part of their diet. And interesting enough, when I was in South Dakota, I did a mission trip on a reservation there, and we had fry bread tacos.
Yep.
Yeah, delicious.
Yep, had those too, and you can eat it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The history of fry bread is kind of sad, though. It's from when Indians and Native Americans were put on reservations, and they were no longer hunting, and they were given, flour, fat, and salt from the government. But they've come and embraced it, and now it's a celebratory meal.
Yeah.
And I love how that the history is still changing, it's evolving, and that's why I love teaching that class. Yeah.
And those opportunities, we call them high impact experiences here, you're making art history come alive for those kids. And whether it's a study abroad to Rome or it's this trip to the powwow, which is, it must be very rewarding for you to actually see their reactions, their real time, because it's something a little bit different than watching a PowerPoint presentation or even a book where you see these pictures of artwork where you actually come right before some things that you've only been able to read about.
Yeah, and I think, the College of Arts and Letters and the Art and Design department and all the departments are really good at having that engagement outside of class. And I think that's important for making those lasting connections with students.
Well, the next thing I want to talk to you about is something that you called a passion project that you've been working on, which is your book. And so let's talk a little bit about that and how that's developed and where it is.
It is done.
Yes.
Done. It is a passion project because it came from my dissertation, finished in 2012 at Temple University. Set it aside, taught, developed classes, wrote some articles and did conference papers and edited a book. And of course I decided before the pandemic to sign a contract with a publisher, not knowing that the world would close, including the museum. I was actually in Italy doing research in March 2020. I had a faculty research release that semester, and I was a guest scholar at the American Academy. And everything was unfolding day by day. And I actually had to leave early, and I'm glad I did, or I would have gotten stuck. But I came back and, I was not teaching. I know faculty had to transition quickly, but the library closed, which was my thing that I needed. Interlibrary closed. But the book was a passion project because that was one moment where I didn't think I'd finish, right? There were many of those moments. And because I was doing it for myself, really, it was a career goal, just kept chugging along and
push through.
The main amount of work was getting the copyright reproduction images. For the images, I had 128 images, and I had to contact museum workers and library archivists in 7 different countries to get permissions. And most of it happened, I was having to do it during the pandemic. So people were writing me from home, and it was really neat to see people still getting done what they needed to do. The book is called The Cults of Raphael and Michelangelo, Artistic Sainthood and Memorials as a Second Life. And so it really takes a look at how those 2 artists in particular became famous, but more about how they were idolized after death. And I take it all the way to the 19th century. And I specifically look at events surrounding their burial and their tomb memorials, like both tombs were opened. Casts were made of Raphael's skull and skeleton in the 19th century. A lot of really fun stuff. So I kind of verge on cultural history, a history of objects, not just art. And so it's about kind of that second life, which is kind of like your fame and your afterlife after death.
All again happening in Italy, and I'm sure that study abroad is going to be so exciting. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you as an art history person, besides Rome and Italy, where else do you like to travel, and what's next for you after going back to Italy?
Yeah, I would say Rome's definitely my favorite city, and I have those museums I continue to go to, but I would call myself a museum junkie. So, every time I go to a conference, I go to the museums in that city. Like I'm going to Minneapolis next week for 16th Century Society to present a paper. And I'm actually going to look at the Native American collections at the Institute of Art. So, my favorite museum, the Isabella Stewart Gardner is a really fun one in Boston. And she brought over all these materials in the early 20th century and built an Italian villa. And it's all repurposed material, so like from Gothic cathedrals and Roman mosaics, and it's all integrated into the architecture, and it's all decorated with Renaissance and Baroque, mostly paintings and decoration. So it's kind of experiential in that it's similar to how it was when she lived there, early 20th century. So that's a fun one.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure whatever you learn as you go along, you will continue to share that with our students. And for that, I thank you not only for that, but also being on today's podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners for checking out not only today's podcast, but for joining us in the future. We will continue to profile some of the outstanding professors we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.